Jasmine with the Potomac Bead Company, and today I am going to show you how to make these Triad earrings, as I'm calling them, out of delicas. And it's an open triangle that you may see in the future as well too in other videos that I'm kind of playing around with. But I thought I would do just a simple video to kind of get you guys in the habit of creating these little triangles. They are a one-sided triangle and they have kind of a tubular shape to them. If you need any of the materials to do these Triad earrings, on the left-hand side here of the video, we'll put a little pop down that links to all the different materials that are used in the earrings if you would like to purchase them from me online. Also, if you have a tablet or a phone, you may not get those pop-ups. Sometimes they're blocked. On the bottom of the page here, right underneath the video, there's a description that says what the video is about. If you hit the little show more button there, it'll give you links to all of the different products as well. For these Triad earrings, we are going to be using 11O delicas. I am using them in the Duracoat galvanized silver color because I wanted to keep these pretty neutral as I'm working with. Again, these are the 11O delicas, which are the Miyuki brand, in that Duracoat galvanized silver. In addition to the 11O delicas, I also need 9 of my 15O seed beads in a similar silver color. So I just happen to have these opaque smoke ones sitting nearby, and that's what I used in my triangle. But any sort of close color will do, or if you do want the seams there to stick out, you can use a different color as well. In addition to the delicas and the 15Os, something that's optional is adding in some pearls. Because there are 3 pieces and it's a triangle, that's when I went with the Triad name. I'm using some 6mm check glass pearls because I wear pearls a lot, so this way I figured it would kind of match everything if I want to wear these triangle earrings. For the component pieces of the triangles and attaching them to the ear wires, I am going to be using a head pin and some 24 gauge wire. You'll need 2 head pins, one for each of the bottom of your pieces, and then the 24 gauge wire, you're looking at about 6 inches that you'll need, 3 inches per each piece of your earring. Also, you want to have 2 ear wires if you do want to do them as earrings. You can also link these together in a bracelet, and I'll kind of have more to come on that in future videos. To string the whole thing, I am using 0.006 wildfire beading thread in the green color, and I have a size 12 needle attached to my 2.5 feet of my thread. Handy to have by, you want your thread zap or your thread burner to burn down the edges of the thread as you complete your triangle. It also helps to get the thread off the spool. You're also, because you're doing a little bit of wire working, going to want some pliers near you. There's a bent nose pliers, a wire cutters, and a round nose pliers. The round nose pliers are going to be used to make round loops. The cutters are going to be used to cut your wire pieces. And these flat nose or these bent flat nose pliers are going to be used to hold the wire as you are twisting and bending. So for now, I'm going to kind of put them to the side. Most of this video is going to concentrate on doing our triangle shape. Like I said, it is a 3D shape and it's based on peyote stitch. So if you don't know peyote stitch and you want to follow along with the Triad earrings, it's a good idea to watch one of the intro to peyote stitch videos first before jumping right into doing shapes with peyote. So that's just a little kind of heads up with that. Once you've got peyote down, come on and join us for these Triad earrings. They're really easy once we get going. The hardest part that we're going to do is kind of forming them together and seaming up the back. And don't worry, it'll be pretty painless. That we'll get ready to get started. So go ahead and get started. We're going to move our component pieces off to the side and get ready with a little pile of our delicas and our couple little 15O seed beads for our corners. So for the triangle, our exterior row, the count is going to be 13. To get started, I have a stop bead on the end of my thread and needle here, which is a bead that's going to come off the project that is not included in the project. So it's a bead that's different. It's a gold bead in this case. And I just went back through the bead 2 times away from a 1.5 inch tail. To start off, I'm going to add a 15O and then 13 of my delica beads. Once I have my 13 beads on, I'm going to add another one of the 15 O's. Again, a pattern of 13. We'll go on to the thread and needle. Because it's 3 sides, as you can probably guess, I'm going to add one more of my 15 OC bead, and then one more grouping of 13. Once I have my 13 beads on each side, I'm going to create my triangle shape. The triangle shape, each side will consist of 13 delicas. The corners will have those 15 O's that you can kind of pick out there at each little spot in the corners. Because I started with a 15 O, I do not need to end with a 15 O. Coming back to the starting side now, I'm going to tie a knot and remove my stop bead and simply tie a knot. Pull the knot tight, and that'll tighten up your triangle. You can do smaller triangles if you want to, but the 13 count is the size that I preferred for the earring. So you can do bigger or smaller. You'll just have to figure out kind of the conversion and how many actually rows of peyote you're going to have to do based upon that. To start out now, we're going to do the peyote stitch. So I have my knot that has been tied nice and tight, and I'm going to take my needle and thread, go through the 15 O as well as the first 11 O delica. Once I'm out the delica, I'm going to add another delica onto the needle, skip the next one in line, and pick up the third delica. Again, skip the next delica in line, and pick up the fifth delica. Again, skip sixth and go through the seventh. So this is why I said it's important to kind of know peyote stitch before you're getting into doing these triangles. I'm going to skip a bead and go in then to the odd count bead. I'm going to keep going until I get to that corner bead, which is going to be next to my 15 O. So I have one more bead to add. I'm going to sew through my last 15 O, or my last delica bead in that row, as well as the 15 O. Once you're done this row, you should have basically 6 sets of 2 of your peyote beads here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of those raised 2 with an open delica on each end. Going into each side then, I'm going to add take my needle through the first delica and repeat, adding a row of peyote stitch on each side. Again, skipping over the even beads and going through the odd count beads from that first original row that we added. As you do peyote and you're feeling comfortable with it, you can progress into all kinds of fun things. Peyote is the base for a lot of great shapes and even some bead art. It amazes me what people can do with beads and what they take the time to do with beads. So as I come around here, I'm just adding in my last bead, and I'm going to sew through my 15-0 at the end of this row. And while I have my needle there in my hand, I might as well sew through the first delica on the third side. Coming out then, you can do that count again if you want, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of your groups of 2 with a delica on each side. Now to progress, we're going to go to the last side here and do the same thing. So I already sewed through the first delica, and now I'm getting ready to add on. You could do this stitch with seed beads rather than the delica beads. It's just harder if you're not familiar with peyote stitch to see exactly which beads you're picking up. Also, it's not going to have that same sharp effect that I like in these triad earrings that I'm going for. As I come back to the starting side now, I'm going to go through the original 15-0 that we put on our thread from the baseline and come out. That's going to get you kind of your base for your triangle. You can see it doesn't look much like a triangle yet because we haven't really pulled in our sides. However, you should note and make sure that next to each of your corners here, of your 3 corners, that you want to have a delica, a 15-0, and a delica exposed with no other beads connecting to them. To start our next row, I'm going to step up my needle through that first 11-0 delica after the 15-0, as well as the first delica from my second row that I just did. Not to confuse you, especially if you don't know peyote, but that's actually the 3rd row. When you first do your first line of your peyote stitch, it's actually 2 rows at once. So we're coming out of our 3rd row, and we're going to add more of our delica beads on. And the peyote stitch now is very simple because you're going to see exactly where you need to put another delica bead in between each of those 6 delicas that stick out the side. So remember, we counted those 6 rows of 2. We are now adding a delica in between each of those 6 rows of 2, which are going to give us 5 delicas on top. So you should end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 delicas at the top. When I get to the corner and I'm over that space for the delica, 15 delica, I want you to grab another 15-0 seed bead and sew straight across to the 3rd row on the next side of the triangle. Here's where the triangle will start to take shape, is as you're pulling it in towards itself and pulling in that corner. Again, then we're going to progress to the 2nd side of the triangle, and I'm doing my peyote stitch, adding in 5 new delica beads. As I add in this last delica on this side, I'm going to add in the delica, and as I get to the corner here, pick up one of my 15-0 seed beads and sew into the delica on that 3rd and final side of the triangle. You can see the triangle starting to take a little bit more shape now as the sides start to conform into a triangular shape. We're at the last side now, and I'm adding in my 5 delicas for what will actually be our 4th row of peyote stitch. And as I finish up then, get my last delica in here. And to finish up, I'm going to pick up a 15-0 and go straight across then to that 2nd row, or that 3rd row rather, of my peyote on the first side, as well as the first delica that I put on this time around, which is that 4th row of peyote. Give a nice tight pull. Now you can see that triangular shape is starting to happen. What we're doing with this odd count peyote that we're doing is we're decreasing the amount of beads in each peyote row. So previously we had 6 rows of 2, now we have 5 rows sticking up, and then we're going to add in 4 beads and continue on. Each time we get to a corner, we're going to add in another one of our 15-0s. So going along the side now, I'm coming out the first bead that was added the last pass around, and I'm going to add in another row of peyote, picking up the delicas and adding them in. So as I add in the delicas, this time I'll have 4 delicas that I'll add in between those 5 that we added at the previous row. At the corner then, pick up another 15-0 and sew over to the first of the 5 beads on the second side. Again, add in 4 more delicas in between your rows of your peyote. There's our third. Thread wants to get caught. Make sure your thread doesn't get caught. Add in my 4th bead. And then as I round the corner, pick up a 15 and sew in to that first bead on the 3rd side of the triangle. You can see this starts to pull in that triangle towards itself as you decrease the sides, and then also using those 15-0s on each of the corners brings it in even more. So I have 4 more delicas to add in on this 3rd angular side. As I add in the 4th then, I'm coming out the last delica, pick up my 15-0 and sew into the delica from the first side that you did, 1 row down, and then through the first bead that you added as you came around that 3rd time. This is going to create a triangle that's a little beveled in shape, you can see, but it has those 3 corners that poke up and that sit up nicely on the bead. As we go in now, we're going to start to kind of pull the project in a little bit tighter, and then we're going to round out the edges. We are going to go around the project one more time, adding in 1 more row of peyote. This last row of peyote will have 3 beads that are added on each of our triangle sides. However, in the corners, we're not going to add a 15-0. We're done adding the 15-0, and I'll show you as we get to a corner. We're just going to sew and bring it in tighter. So we added our 3 on the sides there. You should have 3 at the peak. We're going to sew right over to the other side, not adding in a 15-0. Go ahead and sew in the 3 beads then. And again, after you exit the last delica and you have your 3 beads in place, you're coming out right near the edge where you would normally add a 15, but for this final go around, you're just skipping the idea of the 15 and sewing right into the next delica. I'll add my 3 on this 3rd side. And then we'll get ready to round out our project. So as I add that 3rd bead in place, I'm going to skip over to the first side here, going down to the previous row that we were just attaching onto, and out through the first of the 3rd row of 3 that were added this time around. You can see that really pulls the triangle kind of in. And if you want to, you actually could stop here and kind of create the triangle with that open feel. What we're going to do is pull the edges inside the project and round them out so that way you have more of an opening and more of an angular look. If you notice as you're coming out that last row and that first bead out of the set of 3, you'll notice that peyote stitch, when done an even amount of rows, so this is 6, you can count 2 rows, one on top of the other, to know exactly how many rows of peyote you have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When you have an even count number of peyote, your beads are going to protrude out from opposite ends. So this row here ends to the right, this row here ends to the left. That's what we're going to take advantage of in order to seam up the beads. So basically, instead of adding 2 beads here to the center of that group of 3, we're going to take our needle to the back of the project, and we're going to grab the bead that's sticking out in the next row from the very, very first row of our peyote. I'm going to flip over to the back so you can see what's happening then. So I'm seaming up, coming out of that row of 3, and instead of adding a bead, I'm catching on to the bead that's from the first row that we did of 13. I'm then going to go back to the starter row, that row of 3, and sew down the next bead. Again then, the thread is going to zigzag back and forth. I'm going to go to that first row of 13 and grab the next bead that would be equivalent in line. Again, back to the front, and I'm going to sew through that third delica bead. I have the green thread there, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, but I used green thread intentionally for this reason rather than white. The thread zigzags back and forth between the rows, coming out on the left here, going into the bead on the right. Left, right, left, right. Now what I'm going to do, and you can do as you progress, I'm going to pull this nice and tight. When you turn over to the side then, you can see that nice first angular side is created. To get to the other side and to do the same thing, here along the back, I'm just going to sew from the third bead along that previous row that where thread is coming out of to the first bead of that grouping of 3 on the previous side. Once I'm out that third bead, I'm going to bring my thread and needle to the back. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. Instead of adding 2 beads between this group of 3 there, we're going to catch 2 beads that are on the first row of the peyote. So we're going to go through and zigzag again, going through and going from right to left, basically stitching into 2 beads on that starter row. We're going to end then out the third bead from the center grouping after we've crisscrossed the thread and connected to 2 of the beads on the back. Again, we're going to do a tight pull, and that pulls in our next side. Flipping over then, coming back to the other side. Go ahead and sew through that last set of 3. Bring the needle to the back, and zigzag along the back, catching 2 of the beads from the original starter row. Because of this seaming, this is why I had said if you don't know peyote, it's not the easiest one to catch right away. And we're going to pull it nice and tight. And that's going to pull those seams back and pull those sides back to get that nice angular triangular shape that we want. To finish it off and to kind of complete that, what I'm going to do is sew into the next bead, so it would be catching a third bead on the back side. Pull that nice and tight. Then I'm going to stitch down towards my starter bead. Once my thread is out, at that starting bead, I can tie the knot and actually be done with my triangle. I do want to go back through and just give nice tight pulls along the thread, not the needle, but the thread. And I'm kind of using my fingers to tuck back that last row of the peyote to make it nice and angular along the sides. So giving kind of pinches towards the ends and the corners, pulling those in tight, and pulling the thread a little bit more before I go in and actually tie it off. At this point now, I'll go ahead and tie off the thread. Oops. Tying the two thread end pieces together. That thread end then, after I tie those two together, I'm going to pull towards the back of the project, grab my thread burner, and burn through the threads. Taking the burner then, if you have one, you're going to burn the threads shorter. And kind of push those to the back again. Because you do see a tiny bit of the thread, that is going to be one of my sides of my triad earrings. One of the empty beads on the bottom is going to be where I attach my pearl. Now that we're done with our triangle, I'm going to go ahead, clean up my delicas, and get out my tools and my pearls to get ready to actually attach my ear wire onto the set. So at this point now, my pliers are kind of out here right in front of me, and I'm ready to go with those. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually put my pearl, one of my pearls, on my head pin. I have my triangle pointing again so that that knot is at one of the sides rather than at the bottom tip. I'm going to take my head pin and force it into the 15-0 that sits right along the base of the project. It's a tight fit if you're using anything thicker than a 22 gauge head pin. This is a 22 gauge. From there, making sure that the head pin fits on, I'm going to go ahead and make a loop, which requires my round nose pliers. Right after the pearl, I'm going to bend the wire to the side, make the loop by taking the wire, you can move the triangle down a little bit, and turning it around the round nose pliers, just making an eye pin. I'm then going to pull that 15-0 onto the center of the loop. Once I have that, I'm going to hold with my pliers and coil the extra wire around the base of that eye pin and around the pearl. Now, whether or not you want to have that little wire kind of coil as part of it, that's up to you. I coiled it a little bit because I like the look of it. You don't have to though. You can simply cut off the wire right after. Now that I have that first little pearl at the bottom, I'm going to progress to the top. At the top, I have my 24 gauge wire. I'm going to go through the most central delica bead that is right along the top row. Sometimes this can be a little tricky, and those of you that hate to use wire, you can use a piece of thread if you want, and thread your bead on that way. So I have my 24 gauge wire. I'm putting it through that delica bead and trying not to catch on to the next delica sticking up. That's sometimes why you want to go in and bend the wire a tiny bit. From there, I'm going to bring my short piece of wire up and crisscross it over the longer piece. Holding with my needle or with my round nose pliers, I'm just going to take that short piece of wire and twist it one time around the long piece to make sure that it's not going to come out. Cut off the extra wire of that short piece, and now I have my long piece on. Slide your pearl into place and push it down next to your piece, which is going to also shrink up that little hole. From there, I'm going to make an eye pin or my wire go right along the top of the project. One thing you want to keep track of, because this is a front and back project, that being said, it has the triangle along the back that's open, and then the front triangle that is completed. You're going to want to make your loop so that it fits correctly in the eye pin, or for the ear wire, I'm sorry. So in this case here, I'm going to turn my triangle to the side and make my loop that way, going around the round nose pliers and making the loop. If you do need help making wire loops or anything, as always, I have videos on that as well. Once you have your loop made and ready to go, you can go ahead and coil that wire around as well. So I can hold with my pliers and do a little coiling there. And again, that's just to get that same look kind of mirrored from the top to the bottom. If you don't want the coiled look, just simply cut off the extra wire after you have it twisted around 2 times. Cut off the little remaining piece of wire, grab whatever style ear wire you're putting on, grab your triangle, and simply put it on. Take your pliers, bending that wire loop back into place. At that point then, you will be done with your triad earrings. Like I said, you can play around with these triangles, kind of group them up together. You'll see something else coming out from me later on with some of these triangles and having fun with those as well. But I wanted to give you guys a good introduction to the triangles and kind of how to do them before we progressed into another design. As always, if you need any of these materials for these triad earrings, you can go back to the very beginning of the video to the little drop-down menu that we have there. You can also go below the video to the description of the video and connect to it there as well. Lastly, what you can do if you want to is you can subscribe to this YouTube channel to get regular updates when we post new videos about new designs, new ideas, new things going on in the beading world, and new products coming out to you as well. As always, you can stay connected with us by visiting PotomacBeads.com, checking out our Instagram and Twitter and Facebook page. As well as if you really want to stay connected to kind of the beading world, you can join our Facebook forum group for beading and jewelry making. Ask to become a member there. Check out everything that everybody's doing. Get some awesome ideas. Ask for some advice and give some advice as well. And interact, like I said, with a great group of artists that love to make jewelry in all different mediums and see the wonderful work that they have created. As always, everybody, with everything I do, thank you so much for watching and have fun creating the triad earring.